Okay, I'm going to show an example of why it's good to know multi-threading and types of like timing processing. So an example is when we're shaking here, we need to know what pass we're in and what the time is. The problem with setting like the order of operations, if we set it down here, which usually is better because you'd start at case 0, but instead we're increasing by 1 first, is that if you do have it down here, because you're setting shake to false, it's possible to have what is called like an intercepted trigger. So down here, this is called when there's a collision. Now, a collision can happen at any time, right? So we don't want it to happen if it's already shaking, wait till again to shake, which is understandable, but you're setting the time to reset and the number of passes. So theoretically, it's possible that this could be false, and if you were setting time right here, this was false and it needs to set to 0. But because you're right here setting time again, you would have an issue. So it's good to know this is a timing or what we could consider multi-threading position. You're supposed to read the code downwards. So as you read downwards, you realize that this could be false, then this down here could happen. And if that, because these are two different events happening at two different times, if this happens, then it could also happen with what's down below here. So this is why the timer and the number of passes has to be calculated above. And so instead we don't start at 0 because we're adding 1. So we have to start at 1 here. And this gets very complex to kind of understand until you see it. You have to physically see it. You have to realize that this can happen at any time. It can happen from a collision, it can happen from a call, but because it happens at any time, you have to read the code downwards. So the last thing that's happening is you're setting the shake to true. Well, then the last thing that happens in another piece of code anywhere needs to also be false, the very last thing, if that makes any sense. You cannot put any, I mean, logically you could do this if you didn't have time restraints. You could have that down below and you could start at case 0, but in this case you cannot, which is very interesting to know.